Let's talk about Wayne's Arcade World. Now, we've definitely talked a lot about Wayne's Arcade World on this channel. You've seen Wayne's Arcade World evolve quite a bit since we moved up to McHenry. I've talked about the history of Wayne's Arcade World in those videos. You know that we had version 1.0 and version 2.0 of Wayne's Arcade World in my childhood home in Northlake, which has since burned down, and now version 3.0 is here in McHenry, where I finally had the space for a man room. Now, while I certainly have talked a lot about the history of Wayne's Arcade World, I haven't given you proper visual representation of what Wayne's Arcade World was back in the day, back in Northlake. Well, now that is going to change. I have a pretty decent collection of old photos of version 1.0 and version 2.0 of Wayne's Arcade World. Now, due to the house fire, I probably have lost a lot of my non-digital photos prior to 2005. Some maybe in my sister's storage unit, I really don't know. But thankfully, I scanned all of these photos with a scanner back in the early 2000s, maybe the late 90s. Now, the only reason that I have these photos saved digitally is because I used to make websites back in the late 90s and the early 2000s. Very basic HTML pages. That was sort of my hobby back then. You know, you can think of the very 90s early internet type web pages with the animated GIF buttons and that sort of thing. But yeah, that was my thing back in the day before YouTube became my hobby. I used to make websites. I made websites for people. I made personal friends and family websites. Think of Facebook long before the days of Facebook. I would make web pages to update my friends and family. I'd send them the website via email back then. We didn't really have social media, and I would put updates, what was going on with my family and my travels. And one of the things that I did there was make an online photo album. Pretty revolutionary for the day, maybe. But I would scan my non-digital photos and put them onto my personal friends and family website. And I would occasionally update it, and if there was a holiday or something, I'd put photos in there. But one of the photo albums, and you can think back to a typical Facebook photo album, their photo section, that's basically what I had. I designed my own on my website, and one of the albums that I had was for Wayne's Arcade World. So I had photos scanned and on my website from Wayne's Arcade World dating from as early as 1993 up until 2003. Now, as I've kind of discussed, I like to have my files backed up and archived in multiple places. I'm kind of OCD like that. Well, I had all my website files backed up onto external hard drives, and that is what allowed me access to these old Wayne's Arcade World photos long after my personal friends and family website was gone. And what I did was, back in my very early days of Facebook, I took the backups of all those Wayne's Arcade World photos and upload them to its own Facebook photo album. So, kind of interesting how all that evolved. And so these photos have just been sitting on my personal Facebook for many, many years now. Now, obviously, since I got a digital camera, I took a lot more photos of Wayne's Arcade World back in the version 2.0 days. Well, of course, those are all still on my Dell desktop back over there. So I've accumulated all the non-digital photos, some of the digital photos, in particular from the transformation where we had to return the Avalanche Centipede in 1942, and then we got a game in return, a JAMA cabinet, which included two games, TMNT, Turtles in Time, and Clax. So I have a photo of that setup. That was in 2005, and then we got to the point where I got married and I wasn't really running Wayne's Arcade World anymore, and it became more of a rec room for my mom, my sister, and there were still some games in there for quite a few years before they were returned to Pat, my cousin who runs Star Wars Arcade. And there's some very interesting photos that I haven't shared with you yet of the very beginning stages of Wayne's Arcade World version 3.0 in McHenry. Now, really, since 2022, you have seen the development of Wayne's Arcade World version 3.0 through all my vlogs and the unboxings and me getting new decorations. But the very early days were quite interesting, and I am going to share all of that with you today. And I'm really excited because thanks to my new laptop and my new video editing software, I finally have an opportunity to do a video like this, where these photos will serve as B-roll, sort of, and I basically am going to talk through them in the background. Of course, I got to time everything just right, so this is definitely something new for me, so this is also going to serve as a learning experience for future videos. So without further ado, let's get on to the first photo. Now, I know we've discussed this before, but real quick, go over it one more time. Wayne's Arcade World was established in 1991 with the game Avalanche. Shortly thereafter, we got the Pinball Space Shuttle. After that, my dad really wanted the arcade game Spy Hunter, but if you know anything about that cabinet, you know it is a very tall cabinet. And even though my cousin, Pac-Man Pac, can do miracles getting games just about any place, he could not get that game upstairs in our house in Northlake to version 1.0 of Wayne's Arcade World. It wasn't happening, so we ended up getting Centipede in 1942 as a replacement. And then we had those 4 arcade games up until 2005, which we will discuss later. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any pictures from 1991 or 1992 for whatever reason saved on my personal friends and family website, so we have to start with 1993. Now, this is a very interesting one. This is my friend Drew, by the way. Now, everyone I'm going to show here is an adult at this point, so I have no problem with giving their first names at least. But this is my friend Drew, and not only is this my friend Drew, but this is the friend that had the Sega Genesis. I've discussed this before. I had a friend that had the Genesis, had a friend that had the PlayStation, had a friend that had the Xbox. Well, this was my friend that had the Sega Genesis over at his house. Both him and his brother Daddy were my best friends for many, many years. Lived in the neighborhood. This is him playing 1942, which I had downstairs in our living room for a very short time before we moved it up to version 1.0 of Wayne's Arcade World upstairs. I don't know exactly why we had it down here other than just to have it look cool. I don't remember why we had it down there. I don't remember why we decided to move it upstairs, but for a very short time, we did have it here in the living room, and that's what you're seeing in this photo. And yeah, if you can see from that sign, it says Wayne's 12th birthday sleepover. So this was my 12th birthday sleepover where I took this photo. But now we are going back to version 1.0 of Wayne's Arcade World upstairs. Yeah, welcome to the original version of Wayne's Arcade World. Now, I'm just kind of doing a background voice, so I can't really point anything on this photo. So the kid on the left is another one of my close neighborhood friends, Jesse. And on the right is my cousin, Andy. This is our space shuttle pinball. This is still 1993, and you can see my first stereo there. This was before my awesome Iowa AIWA stereo. I can't remember what brand this stereo was. It wasn't anything fancy. Did have a CD player and a double cassette player. And you can see my cousin looks like he's got one of my little microphones there, probably recording something onto audio cassette. And then right above him, you have my dartboard, which was it was okay. It was called electro darts. It had suction cup things, but never really stuck well to the dartboard. But that was in Wayne's Arcade World for a very long time as well. Continuing in 1993, here is Drew's brother Danny. Speaking of Danny, he is playing Centipede. So we already had Centipede in 1942 and Space Shuttle by 1993. We had the full set of games. Continuing in 1993, here is kind of an aerial picture of Space Shuttle, the stereo, and the dartboard. And now we have entered 1994. This is September, playing 1942. She was one of the kids that my mom babysat back in the day. And actually, September's mom is the one who got me that IBM portable personal computer that I discussed in my PC Hoarders videos. And yeah, her mom I owe a lot to for getting into computers back in the day. And actually, it was one of her computers that I first experienced the internet on back in like 1996, I think. She had dial-up before we even did by a couple of years. And yeah, I first experienced the internet on one of her PCs. 1994. Now we have kind of a blurry and dark photo here. You can only do so much with those 35mm cameras back in the day. Didn't have a lot of lights on probably, but we have the Space Shuttle on the right, 1942, and those shiny things are license plates. Yeah, I was collecting license plates back in the day as well. And on the top, you can see a little green thing. That's a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle hanging from something. Still in 1994, this is Space Shuttle with one of my hamsters walking around the top of it. This might have been my hamster Butterball. I had one unusually chill hamster that never hid, never ran away, just kind of chilled outside or on the bed. And yeah, a really cool hamster. I had many, but he was the coolest hamster I ever had. And that might be him, but I'm not 100% sure. 1994, we continue with the Avalanche, the first ever game we got back in 1991, next to the Centipede. I always thought this was really cool, having these two games together, just the whole arcade vibe that I had by that. I would turn off all the lights in the room, all the decorative lights, and just have those two games on. And the glow of the fluorescent from the marquees and the coin mechs, and how that put a glow into the room. It's hard to describe. I know it doesn't make any sense, but there was a vibe when I did that, and yeah, I'll never, ever forget that. Of course, we have all the turtles on the tops of the games. You're going to see turtles as a big theme throughout Wayne's Arcade World's history, and it's still obviously part of Wayne's Arcade World in version 3.0. And I think I have a Depeche Mode poster on the left. Both my cousin, Andy, which you've already seen, and I were really into Depeche Mode and Erasure back in the day. On the right, we also have my Raggedy Ann chalkboard from my childhood. I reused that for a while to record high scores from these arcade games. Still in 1994, here's another picture of Space Shuttle. You can see 1942 on the bottom left corner. One other interesting thing, you could see an Acer box underneath the Space Shuttle. It was mostly used for storage at this point, but it was a box from one of my old Acer systems. All right, we are in 1995 now. Now, you can see a little digital signboard up on the top there. Yeah, that was like a message board that you would program with a remote. I think we got that from Sam's Club back in the day. And you can sort of make out the date that I think it says April 7th, 1995. Space Shuttle on the bottom right, 1942 in the middle there. My stoplight. So up towards the top left, you see that stoplight? Yep, that's the stoplight we have in version 3.0 of Wayne's Arcade World today. I also now in the top left have a basketball hoop that was in the arcade for quite a while as well. I have a Wisconsin bumper sticker below that basketball net, and I have some CDs on the left, my CD holder, which had a lamp on top with like a very hot halogen light. That is on the left. In 1995 again, here we have Space Shuttle, the Dart Machine, Stereo. You're going to start seeing some of these mirror signs, like I have the Wayne's Arcade World one now. The one on Stereo says Ace of Base, and then we have another decorative light towards the right. That one unfortunately does not work anymore, although I still do have it in my Northlake boxes. 1995, here's a picture of 1942, and you'll see a phone that I never really used, but of course, as a quote-unquote business, I had to have a phone. And 1995, here is my cat Snuggles sitting on top of the 1940 shoe. She liked to do that a lot. And now we are in 1996, and these next few photos, you're going to start to see balloons, and up on the top here, you see like banners. Those are indeed happy birthday banners. This was right around the 5th anniversary of Wayne's Arcade World, 1991 through 1996. And so we started to decorate a little bit for that. You can also see we're starting to expand a little bit more with the license plates. And now you got some balloons, but yeah, you kind of start to get the full idea of what version 1.0 of Wayne's Arcade World looked like before we moved downstairs into the basement in 1997. So yeah, we got a bunch of balloons. You can see my string lights up towards the ceiling. Right in the top middle, we have a NBA Jam poster. On top of my stereo, you'll see the railroad light, which we still have in version 3.0 of Wayne's Arcade World. Also a very cool basketball phone, which I don't know whatever happened to that. And now we are going to proceed a few years to 1999. My sister had been born. She took over the room that Wayne's Arcade World version 1.0 was in, so we moved to the basement. We have Space Shuttle on the left, Centipede in the middle, and then just a tiny bit in the corner you can see Avalanche. Of course, we still have Turtles decorations on top of the Centipede, and I think that stereo might be my Iowa stereo, and I really love that stereo. I wish I still had it. Wish it was working. I honestly don't know what happened to it. I think it just sat in storage, but it may have stopped working. And you're going to see an old computer on the left. We're going to get a better shot of that in a moment as well. Right here. Still in 1992, you have our 1942 on the left, our signboard up towards the top, and that sign right above the signboard says no way. I'm not really sure what that poster is. Now, the mirror things that I said we're going to be seeing a lot of those right by the windows. That one says Dave Matthews Band. Of course, our Electro Darts dart machine made it to version 2.0 of Wayne's Arcade World. And right below that, besides the old CRT TV and the gumball machine and the Pepsi machine, which was actually an old Kleenex box that I converted into like a little bank basically. Just kind of put a little slit in it, and you would put your coin in right about where you would normally put a coin in the Pepsi machine, and made a little bank out of that. That was something that I did. Right next to all that, you are gonna see the Packard Bell multimedia computer that I showed you in the PC Hoarders videos. So at this point in 1999, we got our Acer Aspire, that gray computer. So that was upstairs in the main office area, and we had moved this downstairs to Wayne's Arcade World. Now we are in 2001. We've entered the new millennium, and this next set of photos is a pretty exciting one for me. Pretty important because this was the first time that my sister, Jessica, got to experience Wayne's Arcade World. Yeah, this is the first time I took her down and introduced her to the games in the basement, and she attempted to play them even though I'm sure she didn't really know what she was doing. Here she is playing 1942, and here she is playing Avalanche. I mean, her head is barely above the playboard there. And here she is on a chair playing Centipede. Still in 2001. This is also a very cool photo. So my sister is over there messing around with Space Shuttle, and my grandma, the one that I featured in that Kittyland train video, is on the right playing Avalanche. And now we are in 2003, our last set of non-digital photos. This is 1942, and check out that Rugrats in Paris, the movie advertisement. Yeah, as I'm sure you're well aware, I've always been really into Rugrats. No need to go into too much detail on how I got that advertisement. I'll just say it is related to the time that I worked in retail. That is Henry on the left. His nickname back then was Butch. That is actually September's brother. And of course, my sister on the right. Now, we're going to be showing some folks. Again, everyone is all grown up at this point. I kind of call them my cousins, but they're all my cousins' kids, actually, because most of my cousins were a lot older than me. But this is one of my cousin's kids, Aaron, playing Space Shuttle, and of course, Centipede on the right. And you can actually see my original monitor from that gray Acer Aspire on the bottom left. Now, what I think may have happened here, because we didn't get our first flat monitor until we got that Dell Dimension in 2004. I think this monitor was starting to go bad and it was really fuzzy, so we swapped with the beige one and put it upstairs. So I think that's why that gray monitor is downstairs. But we still had, at this point, the Packer Bell in version 2.0 of Wayne's Arcade World. Now we have my sister playing 1942, and the other girl is my cousin's kid, Amanda, which actually now has kids of her own. Still in 2003. 2003, we also have my cousin's kid, Ashley, playing Space Shuttle. And we have, again, my cousin's kid, Ashley. She is playing Avalanche. And we have my other cousin's kid, Tyler, playing Space Shuttle. And now we have entered the year 2005. And here is our first digital photo in our collection. September 4th, 2005, we will have some digital timestamps now to help us, but yeah, we were still in version 2.0 of Wayne's Arcade World, and yeah, I just wanted to include this because this is really one of the first photos I had where I sort of posed in Wayne's Arcade World, so yeah, here's a younger version of Memories by Wayne. 2005 still, here is a picture of Space Shuttle. Now you can see at this point, Space Shuttle was in need of a lot of repairs. It still worked, sort of, but it needed a lot of electrical work, and you can see like 3 of the scores are gone on the display. I think my cousin had taken those to get them fixed. Now you can see some of the decorations there. There is my Sprite lamp, and then there on top is a really cool light that I don't know whatever happened to. I really wish I could have saved that in the new version 3.0 of Wayne's Arcade World, but I never could find it. And here's another picture of Space Shuttle and Centipede. Again, also check out all those license plates up top. We also had a black light on the top right, replaced a fluorescent with a black light at that point. And here's a picture of Centipede and Avalanche, and a much clearer picture of my beautiful Iowa stereo. And now you're going to see the 1942 on the bottom right, and it's a little out in the middle of the room because this is right before my cousin came over to take these games away. Now you can kind of sort of tell while the marquees are lit up, the monitors don't light up. You don't see anything on there. And that's because by this point, we're looking at October 13th, 2005. All 3 monitors, CRT monitors, were dead. Centipede, Avalanche, and 1942. Now it says Tron, and that's because that was what this tabletop originally was, and then it got converted before I got it into 1942, and then I sort of decorated the other side of it. I think actually me and my dad kind of put that together. And here's another picture of the 1942 tabletop and Avalanche. And it's moving day. Here is the 1942 on my cousin's truck. I never saw this thing again. So that is my sister on the left there on the truck. My cousin's husband on the right, Glenn, getting everything all secure with the avalanche and centipede. And here is my replacement for 3 bad games. I got this Turtles in Time, but like I said, it was a JAMA board, so he also had a board that had clacks on it, so I just had to go into the machine and swap it out if I wanted to play clacks, but the marquee was for Turtles in Time. And this is a day after. We got everything set up in the arcade. Space Shuttle is still on the left, and now we have Turtles in Time set up where the centipede was. And of course, I got all my Turtles decorations on top there. Moving ahead a few more days. Again, we got my cousin's kids. We got Amanda on the left playing Space Shuttle. And I believe that is Angelo on the right playing Turtles in Time. Also, one of my cousin's kids. And here's everybody. Got my sister on the left playing Space Shuttle. Got my cousin's kid Aaron and my cousin's kid Angela playing Turtles in Time. Of course, we got all of our license plates up there as well. And right there towards the top left is that little railroad crossing decoration that we still have working today. All right, now we are going to jump ahead about 15 years to 2020. Do you recognize this room? I'm sure you do. This is what would eventually become version 3.0 of Wayne's Arcade World. And yeah, I know this is a crazy room. This was taken during our first walkthrough of the house, our first tour, as they would show us all the rooms. I would take pictures. And yeah, this was a crazy room with a lot of picture frames. One thing I wanted to show here is towards the bottom left, what do you see? Does that look like a TV? Yep. That is the CRTV, the heavy chonker that we play games on during today's live streams. Yeah, that thing is insanely heavy. And all I ever did was wheel it from the left side of that wall to the right side. It has never left that room, and I hope I never have to move it out of the room. It's still on the exact same tray as well. Now we're going to jump ahead to 2021. We have officially bought the house but have not moved in yet. So we were kind of in a transition period at this point. They needed a little extra time until their new house was ready. Plus, obviously, as you can tell, they had a ton of stuff to pack. So basically, they rented from us after we bought it until they were moved out. And this is during that transition period. And you can see a lot of stuff has actually gone out of the room at this point. Still a few picture frames up there though. 2021, I believe we are officially moved in at this point, but the walls are yellow. My wife would paint them white a little bit after this photo was taken, but yeah, everything at this point that is in this room was basically left for us and went to either different spots of the house or eventually thrown out. You can see that TV on the left. I haven't moved it yet. And here we are. Again, this is 2021. These are all going to be basically 2021 photos, but we're starting to look a little bit more like Wayne's Arcade World now. The TV has been moved to the right. We have our little TCL Roku TV in the middle with some of our gaming systems and the Wii. I do not have the lamp that you're used to seeing yet, but yeah, you got the DVD rack on the right, but it's going to start to look a little bit more familiar going forward. And this is a different angle, so yeah, that looks a lot different, I bet. Basically, the only decoration at this point that I have up there, I have that game room sign, but then I have my leg lamp and a stereo that I no longer have, and the DVD rack. So yeah, the decoration tables look quite a bit different today, but that will change shortly. Now, this should start looking very familiar. So here we have the DVD rack in the middle, which I had for the longest time until recently I moved it. We have the lamp now that you guys are familiar with, the Turtles marquee up on the top, the game room sign also by the window that you are familiar with. The walls obviously are white. We have our LCD strip towards the bottom, And here is the other side of the room. Now the decoration tables are starting to look a little more familiar, a lot more empty than you're used to now. But we have a few things up there. And here's another picture taken a little bit of time later where we start to have more decorations up. A lot of these you're definitely going to be familiar with. We've definitely got a few new additions and a few new mini arcade games at this point. We got our Disney Stitch lamp on the right, a lava lamp, that little electric light thing that you put your hand on, the railroad light, the disco light, and of course our stoplight that you saw a photo of way back in the 90s. And again, looking very familiar what you're used to. Obviously, a few things have changed here and there, but everything pretty much is in place at this point. You can see some of the gaming systems on the bottom there. And that, my friends, is the last one. I hope you enjoyed this little tour history lesson of Wayne's Arcade World. I've been wanting to do this for a while now. You guys have been supporting me and watching my Wayne's Arcade World and personal videos and all my live streams that I've done at Wayne's Arcade World. You guys have been watching and chatting and leaving super chats. So I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this look into the history of Wayne's Arcade World. Started back in 1991. And hopefully, one day we'll have another big arcade game in Wayne's Arcade, or whether it is a multi-cade or a pinball, I don't know. But I'm happy with what we have, but hopefully one day we'll have a real life arcade machine again. Alright, I thought we would end this video most appropriately here in Wayne's Arcade World, discussing what the inspiration was to start Wayne's Arcade World. Why did I want an arcade game? Now, it's an obvious answer, but also much more complex than that. I know what you're thinking right now. Duh, Wayne, your cousin owned an arcade. Yeah, you're going to want one too. Well, yeah, that's the simple, basic answer, but there's a little bit more to the story than just that. We need to go back to Maple Park, Illinois. Now, I know majority of you are not going to have any clue where Maple Park, Illinois is. It was, and still is, a pretty small town in between Geneva and DeKalb off of Illinois State Route 38. Still a small town, but it has grown up a bit. I have a lot of history with Maple Park, and I have been there a few times over the past 5 years or so, but haven't done a video. Like I said, Maple Park is off of Illinois State Route 38, right on the border of Kane and DeKalb counties. It's actually a little bit closer to DeKalb, not a far drive from where Star World's Arcade currently is. But Star World's Arcade got its start in Maple Park, Illinois. Well, not technically. There's actually some history related to Geneva. I don't know the exact story. I think my cousin, Pac-Man Pat, either bought an arcade or bought the rights to the name Star World's Arcade from a former arcade in Geneva. But as far as I'm concerned, Star World's Arcade got its start in Maple Park, Illinois. Now, my family has a lot of history with Maple Park. My aunt lived there, my cousins lived there, Pac-Man Pat lived there. Now, eventually, as everyone got older, a lot of people moved out, went to towns like St. Charles. That's where my history with Charlestown Mall comes in. But a lot of my family started out in Maple Park, and my mom, my dad, and I went out almost every weekend to my aunt's house in Maple Park. And of course, my cousin, Pac-Man Pat, grew up in Maple Park as well, and opened up Star World's Arcade in this tiny little building. I'll put a screenshot from Google Street View, and it's kind of funny because ever since Star World's Arcade closed down at Maple Park, I think that building has been abandoned. Now, I'm pretty sure that someone owns the property. The times that I have driven by there over the recent years, I've seen cars and trucks in the little parking lot, but I've never seen another business there. There's still newspapers covering up the windows, which could be original from when Pat closed the arcade. I didn't look too close when I was there because, again, there were vehicles on the property. Didn't want to be snooping around, but I was very curious. But yeah, at a very young age, I remember visiting my cousin's arcade and thinking it was really awesome. But still, that wasn't quite the inspiration. The one thing that made me want to have my own arcade. Now, at a very young age, I wanted to have my own arcade when I got older. I thought I was going to open up a arcade business as well when I got older. Obviously, that never happened. I mean, we have Wayne's Arcade World, but I haven't officially opened an arcade. But the true inspiration, the thing that made me want to have my own home arcade, is actually related to my cousin, Pac-Man Pat, as well. But basically, when my cousin moved out of my aunt's house, he either bought or rented this tiny little house right behind Star Wars Arcade. I won't show you the actual house just out of respect and privacy for whoever lives there now, but there was a tiny little 2-bedroom house behind Star Wars Arcade. Talk about a great commute to work, huh? And my cousin lived there. So like I mentioned earlier in the video, Wayne's Arcade World started in 1991. So it was probably either 1990 or 1991 when I had a sleepover at my cousin's house. It was a 2-bedroom house, so he had his master bedroom and a spare bedroom. And guess what he had in that spare bedroom? Yep, arcade games. It was a tiny room. He had 2, maybe 3 arcade games, uprights. I honestly don't remember what games he had, but the moment I stepped inside that room, I fell in love and knew instantly that I wanted my own arcade. So from there, I don't remember exactly how it went down. I'm sure I bugged the heck out of my parents to talk to Pat and have him bring some games over. The only thing I can really tell you is Avalanche was kind of an early game that my cousin had. One of his first. It's a much older game. As such, it doesn't make a lot of money in businesses, even back in the late 80s. So he just had it probably in storage or something and gave it to my parents and me free of charge in 1991. And that was the start of Wayne's Arcade World. I gotta tell you though, man, I had a lot of good memories of Maple Park. Like I said, we were over there almost every weekend having dinner at my aunt's house. And now a lot of my cousins were older than me, at least 10 years older than me, including Pat. My only cousin who was close to my age is Andy, who you saw earlier in the photo slideshow. So we were always the closest, and I slept over at his house, also known as my aunt's house, a lot in Maple Park. And I was a city boy. Okay, I mean, I did grow up basically in the suburb, but I was like a 15-minute drive from Grand Avenue in Harlem, which is basically the start of Chicago. So I was more or less a city boy, just a few miles over in the suburbs. So me going out to Maple Park, it may as well have been the Green Acres. I mean, it felt like a road trip to me. I was not used to the country like that. Now, I pretty much live out in the boonies, but man, Maple Park at the time was in the middle of nowhere, and I really enjoyed it. Now, I did watch throughout the 90s, 2000s, well, besides seeing I-355 being built in the late 80s on our many weekly trips out to Maple Park, passing I-355 off on North Avenue, Illinois State Route 64 in Lombard. I did watch I-355 be built, but I did see quite a housing boom out to the west of St. Charles and Geneva, but at that time, in the late 80s and early 90s, there was nothing out there. And even though it's not related to gaming, I gotta mention one kind of core memory of mine from Maple Park, and that would have to be the trains. Now, obviously, watch my videos, I'm kind of a train fanboy, but the Union Pacific West Line goes through Maple Park. Now, the Metra doesn't go that far. At the time, it only went to Geneva. Now it goes out to Elburn, but still doesn't go out all the way to Maple Park. There's been proposals to have the Metro line go out to DeKalb, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. And the battery just went out on my 1942. Now, if you watched any of my videos from Elmhurst College/University, you know that the Union Pacific West Line is a very, very busy freight line. And it definitely was in the 80s and 90s. And my cousin Andy was also kind of a train fan, so again, very quiet out in the country. So whenever there was a freight train coming, either from the city or out from DeKalb, you would hear the train horn for several minutes before it got to town. So our tradition, as soon as we heard the train horns, we'd run out of the house and head down a few blocks or so to one of the several train crossings that were in Maple Park, and we'd wait for the train and watch it pass by. Just kind of a cool little core memory that I have of Maple Park. So what am I looking for here at Wayne's Arcade World for the future? Yes, I would like to once again have an actual arcade game in this arcade. Now, I have a very small space here. I don't think I would be able to fit a pinball, 2 uprights, and a tabletop in here. There's no way. I've never done measurements, but I still kind of feel like this space is smaller than at least what I had in version 2.0 of Star Wars Arcade. But there are a couple things that ideally I would love to have here. The first and the biggest would be a multi-cade that is a cabinet that has sometimes hundreds of games on it in a mini cabaret form. So these were very popular back in the 80s, back in the golden age of arcade games. They would have these mini uprights, these mini cabinets, and you would often find games like Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, and Galaga on them. And they're just very, very small. And that's a big reason why I would love to get one of those, is because it wouldn't take up a lot of space in this room. I showed you one of those. One of the few times I've ever seen a multi-cade in a mini cab setup was at the last Midwest Gaming Classic. That one wasn't really in great shape, though. At least the joystick was kind of busted. But that's generally something I would love to have. Other ideal situations to get the space shuttle renovated and get it back here. The pinball, that would be awesome. I would possibly consider Avalanche as well as an option. I would love to get my hands on the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pinball, the one that came out in the 90s, the one that I played at the Service Plaza on the Ohio Turnpike. That was a pinball that they did not make a ton of, unfortunately. Every once in a while you see one on eBay. And as an alternative to that, if I ever had a ton of money, I would not object to getting one of the newer Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pinballs. Now, I definitely have brought up some of my ideas to my cousin, but he's a busy guy. He's got a lot of businesses to take care of. So, I'm not going to be a big priority. And I know it wouldn't be free. Now, we got the Avalanche for free, but my parents did pay for the Space Shuttle, for the Centipede, for the Avalanche. I don't remember how much they paid for it. Obviously, situations are quite different now. And it's not practical for me to spend $6,000 on a pinball game when I have kids to feed. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really enjoyed putting it together. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you for watching.